world famous Swense. Here we are talking about the Battle of Hinterstein, or the Campaign of Hinterstein. Sorry.
Yeah, I enjoyed the little bits of sort of metafictional world building that went into it. Just the little additional operational context, the pressure that you kind of put on. I think both me and Melchett from different directions.
You did
That
not like that. You did not like the Italian guy.
oh, I was playing myself as a little prickly and a little image obsessed.
So for the kids at home, there was an Italian guy, then went after Swense as the CIC. So Swense was the CIC of the Vulcanreich forces, the Red Group coming in from the north, and this mouthy Italian, which was a press report, came in and talked about how he just didn't think Swense was doing a good job. Swense and his channel went nuts. It was great.
Oh,
Poor Melcher, this got a beating from his own team. Is it like one of his former senior staff guy at a college went after him? So everybody was getting a shoe in the shin on this one.
No, absolutely. The uh, those little touches do make everything feel a little more like alive and give you a little bit more context for what's going on. So that was I think definitely a good addition to the. Um,
Well, the wonderful thing about Kriegspiel, as being an umpire yourself, is that the news can kind of bend to the situation. So it seems like the news follows the situation almost nearly perfectly, which is amazing how that worked, even though it was all not pre-planned ahead of time. So this is the first of our commander interviews. I wanted to really get into the campaign and the individual tactical action. We're starting with one of the CICs. Who did a terrific job and was actually the victor in the campaign. So congratulations on your win.
Thanks.
I think what you did really well was, despite several setbacks, you kept the momentum going. Like you had a direction that you were heading and you just kept going. And then there'd be a setback. You'd say, okay, just keep going. Okay, reorient it, keep going. And I thought you did a great job. And you had some very capable sub commanders who understood that and kept moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to hit setbacks, and I think one of the things that I almost in a sense tried to just be zen about is not even really worrying that the setbacks were going to happen, not trying to necessarily anticipate what the setbacks would be or what problems would come up, but just knowing at the end of the day, there's going to come a point when we just have to have as many people as possible at one place. I think, and you mentioned this in the after action report that you've already written, but there was this linchpin around Holtz. And that stood out to me. I think that stood out to Melchett. I think everyone who looks at this map kind of eventually you realize everything funnels to Holtz. Like that's the crux, the first really good place that both sides have to make a difference in the battle.
Well, it was interesting because both sides anticipated, I think we'll meet at around Crum/Holtz, and the big battle ended up happening just north of Holtz. So, everybody kind of saw what was coming. What was so initially you start with Drosh and then you move to Trebe. So for those who don't have a map in front of them, I'll throw a map up here because this is an audio podcast, but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the map. So on the eastern side, you had some intermediate objectives or milestones. How did you think about the progression down the eastern side?
Well, I'll have to buy a green screen so in the future I can weatherman it.
That'd be great. Actually, that's the next thing, right? You could do the circles.
A little laser pointer and just all. Yeah, no. So I think Drosh is out there. It's not super defensible. Even not really knowing sort of the limits of where the enemy could get to by the time that the scenario started. I didn't necessarily know I was surprised that there was a garrison there when I encountered it. I think there was some political consideration that might have sort of mandated or
Mhm.
required them to put at least a symbolic show into defending this place. But the strategy there was always pretty much isolate, get around it, and I think that was where we had one of our more sort of tactically flawless, and I wasn't on the ground, but it sounds like there was a very quick outmaneuvering and surrounding of the city that was accomplished without any like great casualties or anything, which is again when at this
Mhm.
1,000-foot view, you're not really seeing that. You're just kind of seeing, well, this is kind of a bump in the road that I have to maneuver around, neutralize, and then just keep going.
You
The
mentioned in your feedback you felt like that one encounter was where you really felt like a CIC. What was behind that?
Yeah, just from the perspective that there was no practical reason I should be there.
Hmm.
I thought that there was nothing I could add to that situation. I mean, I had Decamas and
The Sard. The
uh,
Sard was the division commander. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there was such a brain trust at that city. I'm like, what am I, what am I going to add to this moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have all these other balls in the air. I have
Mhm.
Chris making this long flank attack. I have the Fifth Corps, which I've left out as a pretty much in the air as a sort of advanced column that definitely has no. I mean, it's outrunning its own supply lines, and I don't
Yeah.
know if I knew that at that point or if I knew that that was going to
It
happen.
was just coming. It was just coming to you at about this time when Drosh was happening that the supplies in the east were starting to be overrun.
Yeah, and so yeah, there was just enough balls in the air that was like not going to be the crux of where my attention was focused. So the moments that I think may
Mhm.
most make you feel like a commander are the ones where you really just have to put your trust in other people, and that's a hard thing to do,
Yeah.
especially in like a hobby setting where I can't. I have to hope that people are going to be active and attentive, and
Yeah.
you hope everyone is. But like at the same time, uh, you have sort of different considerations than a general would. But I think it works out to about the same thing. Like, are these people going to be task focused? Are they going to get the job done as
Mhm.
quickly? Are they going to remember the emphasis that I put on speed, on moving, and keeping up the momentum? Because my whole sort of crux was beat the enemy to like the furthest south position we can get to faster than they can get there,
Right.
and be able to pick the ground, and that about half worked the way I wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we head south and talk about further developments, you sent Slock. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it. Slocke 3 because there's two before him. He's the third. Um, Far west with a detachment of cavalry, infantry, and a little bit of artillery. Talk about that far west sweep. What was your thinking on that?
Well, as you can tell from my voice and general crassness, I'm American, as are you.
Yes.
And like all Americans, oh,
1 second there, bud. Hey there. Hey, I'm actually doing the podcast. Yeah. Good. All right. Cool. Um, Sorry about that. I'll cut that out. Let me mark it so I forget it. All right.
oh no,
Cool.
I
So
I
you
think
were
this.
so I'll ask the question again. Just retract. Sorry about that. We got interrupted. All right. So you sent Slock 3 out to the far west with a mixed cavalry, infantry, and artillery detachment. What was your thinking there?
Well, my thinking was basically that, as you can tell by my accent,
Hmm.
my voice, my general crassness, I'm American. And
Yes.
like most Americans, I view cavalry as like kind of a raiding thing, which I know there's not in the
Yeah.
Prussian wheelhouse per se. But I really thought that this was a situation where we could kind of override our normal doctrinal, we're not going to split off these independent raiding forces. We needed something over there, a trip line, and a commander that would be willing to kind of operate on this in this detached capacity, and likely would never get any further instructions from me. I mean, I think the operational rule set even basically said, like, the Prussian way of carrying dispatches, this relay system won't be set up to a detached force. A detached force is lost, basically, to your ability to control it. But I still felt that without something in the West, we'd be vulnerable to just some sort of misfortune, or really, I mean, partly because of the broader picture of a war you painted, I didn't, this felt like part of the front line. Like, leaving it completely out in the air just felt wrong in some sense. And as it was, Sloke or Slock did a great job of kind of without
He
any
did. In fact,
insight.
he made it all the way. He would have ridden into Wilsh, which was the port city, which was the main objective. If we'd given him a few more days, he would have actually just saddled up and ridden into the objective. Now, he would have had zero combat power. He would have had himself a butter knife and a small flag waving, but he would have made it all the way to the objective because, in fact, your opponents, Melchett and the Blue Force, put nothing over there, though there would have been some garrison troops there that would have slowed him down a little bit. But okay.
It was mostly, I assume, sort of a disruptive raiding type thing.
Which is exactly how it played out. No, the Uhlans in the Franco-Prussian War did serve some of that purpose, and they sent raiding parties forward. So he played that role almost historically perfect in terms of pushing one town at a time to figure out what was going on.
I think my own sort of inspiration had been, and I've been reading a lot about the Franklin Nashville campaign, and in the lead up to that, Forrest was very effectively able to basically make Thomas run around Tennessee like a chicken, chasing him from raid to raid. In the lead up to that, the Union always kind of a little behind the ball, and that was that kind of felt like he's very much inhabiting that role, that sort of quintessentially American cavalry raider archetype, more so than anything that, at least to my knowledge, stood out in the European context. But yeah, that was a great little touch there. I love.
Well done, thoughtful. I thought that was well. That's a feather in your cap, because that was well done. And in fact, there was a Western rail line that could still have served Wilsh, which was the port city, and they cut that raiding force. So it just added pressure to. So if you saw a report in the news about Wilsh is now cut off, it was because of that raiding force. So it had his actions actually had a disproportionate impact on the overall political scene. So, okay, back to the big forces. Your after Drosh was well invested, and we'll have another chat with Decimus and Devar. I don't know if it was Decimus or Decimus. That's part of the problem with these Discord names. We don't know how to pronounce them. We see them, we don't know how to pronounce them, but any of us, right? So we'll talk to them about how they did Drosh, which they did an amazing job. In terms of your handing it off to Decimus, him handing it down to Dessard, and Dessard deploying it. That was a model. That was a model operation, and really, really well done. So I don't know who Dessard. We definitely have to get him on here to talk about how clear-eyed his plan was. So, but that was well done. And then I could not find a point where you told Ardius at the 5th Corps to head south to Holtz. So, like, I went back through all your dispatches. I didn't go through your planning. And maybe we'll ask Ardius when we get a chance to talk to him. But at what point did he get it in his head, or at what point did it become part of the plan that he would push beyond his logistics to try to go all the way to Holtz?
It was in the plan. Not that it was logistics, but the plan basically said, 5th Corps, you're going ahead. you're going to Holtz. That's
Okay.
your end goal.
That was his original assignment, basically, was to
That
push
was
all
the
of you out.
original assignment, and to be frank, I did not anticipate the very clever and very well executed double hook that Melchett pulled off in Holtz. I thought Holtz would be relatively defensible, or at least there were enough routes out of it that Artful would be able to pull out if he was seriously challenged.
Yeah. Well, Melchett with Soldier Steve's help and Kolya had a hand in that. They pulled off an equally impressive tactical feat. So we had Drosh, and then they immediately turned it. So it was pretty. Their use of pontoons, their use of double envelopment was pretty amazing. So Artious's original intention was you didn't expect. None of you really expected a lot in Holtz, and it ended up that most of their army was there, and they were able to take two different corps and do an enveloping maneuver, which certainly lost Artios's all of his baggage.
I knew that they had significant forces there.
Yeah.
I expected slightly more, I think. I basically hoped that I could bluff once I kind of knew the shape of things that down there. I knew the presence of more troops than we had, but I still hoped that maybe Artius could bluff to some degree and would leave things uncertain enough
Right.
that we could get more troops there. We could get the supply situation the hoses unkinked, so to speak, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and get everyone there. That was definitely a gamble, and it was a gamble that didn't really pay off. But in the end, and I think this is part of the reason why we ended up winning the battle, is I just did not let that slow down the overall tempo and course of the plan. We took this reversal, but now I know there's 4 divisions here. They know of one division of mine. They might have some inklings that other troops are converging on this location, but
Right.
I have identified a main effort, certainly, and now there's this chance to make their lives a lot more complicated as all of the remaining troops funnel into this sort of narrow spot where, from the news reports, I know that there's pressure on Blue to or Schwarzhofen to make a counterattack. Like they have this pressure to do something about what I've been doing. And I don't necessarily know the details of that pressure. I don't know how that's coming down to them, but I started feeling fairly confident that they would have to make a move. And then from there, they have basically 2 routes. They have the rail and road crossing that goes directly up along the mountain range.
Mm-hmm.
That narrow path that saw so much really intense meat grinder fighting, and massive artillery duels back and forth.
Right.
And then they have the tree path, which is a better path, but I was hoping they would be a little stuck trying to use it because of the weight of forces that I had just across the river to the north.
Right.
There was a big gamble there, and this is part of the reason I think I told every corps, see about putting a pontoon bridge across the Elmbach River, which is dividing our forces. Just see if it can be done. Maybe do it.
Just get one in place.
Hmm?
Just get one in place to increase the connectivity between the north and the south. I think that's right.
I'd asked Chris to do it at one point. I know I'd been bringing it up with every corps commander I talked to, and then when it hadn't been done by that evening, I issued very clear orders. We got to get this pontoon bridge up.
The only thing that upsets CIC Swense more than an Italian spouting off about his strategy is a lack of pontoon action.
Begging for one pontoon bridge.
Right? Just one. All I want is one. What so Christ was to sit at Trebe, which is in the east. Is that
he was to advance south from Trebe and draw the enemy's attention.
Now, one of the things before we could dive down to the battle, you I was delighted in the feedback that many of the red subordinate commanders said the supply had no impact on them at all. And the reason for that is that you had actually sorted it out. So one of the major, shall we say, trap doors in this scenario is that though blue always had the port that they could rely on, so it'd be very difficult for them to get out of supply, red could very easily, without thoughtfully putting their depots in place, have outrun. Actually, you couldn't make it to Wilsh without quite a bit of acrobatics on supply. So the fact that all the red commanders are like, it didn't affect me at all, was a credit to you because you actually thoughtfully put it in place. What was your thinking about the depots just to make sure everything kept supplied?
Basically, I just put them in the places that were already complaining about not having food and guns.
Right. So you listened for the complaints not having food, and then you brought up the food, which actually is a pretty effective way to do it. I guess.
I'm sorry.
Customer-centered design.
First squeaky wheel and apply the grease when I found it.
That's great. Okay. Well, that's like getting there first with the most men. The Swense logistics plan. Listen to who complains and bring them stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
not that easy.
At some point, I think all of the foreplanning in the world is just you know I could have pre-picked locations and stuff, but I did not know how each stage of the campaign was going to go. I knew that placing those was going to have to be kind of a spur of the moment decision, and the best way to figure out who needs supply and where we are having issues in our supply lines is by waiting for people to identify those problems for you and then figuring out where we can put a depot that's close enough that all affected people will be able to draw from it. That's
right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So the supply in place would have robbed your guns of the supply not being in place would have robbed your guns of ammunition, which would have put you at a severe disadvantage because they had to. So there was definitely a trapdoor there that you did not step into or through because you kept your supplies together and then you aggregated your core artillery into grand batteries essentially that offset blue's advantage. So well done there. So talk about so now all roads led. We had this excellent tactical fracas at Drosh, and then Melchett and team did a great job at Holtz. So we had set the stage then, or on the Elmbach River. What was your thinking around the north versus the south in terms of where you're going to put your main effort to start?
Well, this is where I really very much felt that I was sort of the General Lee of the scenario, and Chris was my Jackson. I had talked with Chris. I knew that Chris understood the plan at a high level and understood my intent. Having spent the morning before the battle with him,
right?
And at that point, I was then confident enough to say, go with God, my son. I have given you all I can, all the knowledge I can, at least, of what's going on more broadly. You are going to have a big challenge ahead. You are basically have to maintain this force on the flank of the enemy as best you can for the duration of the battle. I can't even necessarily know how things will go. You're going to have to kind of feel it out for yourself. It was a very tall order. But I think part of the strategy has to be identifying the people who you trust with those tall orders and giving them. Because I knew that just from the way things have been developing, I knew that the northern attack was going to be the trickier one.
Right.
It was this. It had this huge potential to be a complete disaster and just a bloodbath and a meat grinder and this horrible situation because we are attacking on such a narrow front. We have to get across the river. There's so many things that can go wrong here. We have to balance that defensive. We want to keep them from moving north along this route, but yet at the same time, we also want to keep applying pressure so the enemy can't pull off and just move directly on Trebe with the bulk of their forces and attack Chris. So I knew that I felt at least that the North would be the decisive point in the battle, that would be where everything kind of ended up coming down to. So that's where I felt that I had to be. And
Yeah.
it wasn't even that much that I ended up having to do. I think I told some people to concentrate some guns. I mean, at this point, the knowledge and the skill is so high level. I mean, everyone knows what they're doing. A light touch is really all that's needed to just kind of keep everything going in the right direction. Checking in with some divisional commanders, making sure they feel supported, they feel like they know what's going on. But I mean, at that point, the machine of war kind of starts running itself, and that's another great CIC moment to just know when you've done enough, and you can just kind of leave things to the discretion of people who are much more engaged with the minutia than you have been to date.
At what point did you shift? So the North was your focus. You were physically in the North. The North was more constrained by the high ground to its immediate west, and then you shifted and wanted to send what ended up being your reserve, which was two full unblooded divisions. You wanted to send them south across Pontoons, which was our earlier comment about Pontoons. At what point did you realize the North was you were not going to be able to force the North, and you were going to push it to the south?
I wanted to give the North, as long as I believed that I think 12th Corps under Chris and 5th Corps under Artful were still in the fight, and I believed that they were. I hadn't seen any signs that they weren't at that point. I had not had reliable communication with them, but it seemed like they were very likely still in the fight. It didn't seem like we were being directly opposed across the river.
Right.
And I was realizing that the enemy put more forces forward and north than I had really anticipated that they would. That they made that really I had assumed that the enemy main effort would be in the direction of Trebe, while the enemy tried to hold us from crossing the river. But instead, what they did was kind of almost the opposite. We were being attacked from the south, up from Holtz into the I think it was 3rd Corps. I think Decimus's corps was actually actively being attacked all day or almost all day on the first day of the battle, and that changed my thinking about the whole engagement.
Which was a wonderful Kriegspiel moment, or series of moments, because that was never Melchit's intention. And when we have him on, you'll hear the other side of it. But his intention was to hold in the North and then to have his main effort be in the South. He ordered all of his army artillery to go to the South. So he was actually, the push on Trebe was going to be his main effort. And then it just, through the friction, just ended up, the North became its own flywheel of motion. So we'll talk about that when we get him on there. But I think you read it right, and then they executed it in an opposite direction, not even consciously, which was an interesting to watch that unfold. So you pushed how did you think of the 3rd Corps, which was the 13th? I'm sorry, the two divisions, 13th and 14th, ended up becoming your reserve. Did you think of them that way the whole time?
No, I mean, I think somebody was always going to end up in the back of the line there. Right. And whoever they were, they would then be the reserve.
Right.
I had not really put any thought into, I choose you, poor Corps.
Yeah, right. Right. Which is, we were laughing about supply, but it was opportunistic, and they hadn't been in the fight yet, and so they became the only forces on the field that were on both sides that had not seen any combat, which made them fresh, which meant you had an entire corps essentially of fresh troops, which really swung it in your favor.
Yeah,
and it didn't need to end up that way. It might not have ended up that way, but it just accidentally did. So
yeah, okay. And well, I mean, there was, towards the end of the day, I very much was thinking, I mean, if 14th and 15th get here, I don't see any reason to put them into combat. Like, I don't want them to get blooded today for nothing.
Right.
Like, I don't think we're gonna get through. The artillery battery was doing very good work, but
Yeah.
I don't see how that was. I didn't see how we were getting through with the amount of resistance we were getting. So that's when everything really became the pontoon. The pontoon and the hook south is the only way we're going to win this.
Your commander in the south of the 15th, who I think was S-Lock again, if I remember correctly.
He keeps showing up.
He keeps showing up. He sent assistance from his own command to the 13th to help them get that pontoon set up, which speeded up their setup of the pontoon, which offset the late start, which then allowed for those two divisions to come down and put themselves in position to collapse the line. So then that was a complete individual initiative because no message was sent, hey, send help. He saw it happening and he made it happen. It was another excellent moment because he just took the initiative. And
at that point, nothing was going through. I mean, the enemy had cavalry infantry, so...
I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at, I want to make sure that we give credit to the correct person. So I believe it was S-Lock. Anyway, yes, 15th Division was Hoffman or S-Lock. Got it, yeah. I want to make sure.
Get a video of me praising each subordinate individually.
Well, I tell you, I'm always very conscious when we have these individual discussions with yourself or other commanders that there's so many great moments.
Yeah.
Dessart at Drosh, Artful ended up, even after Holtz being outflanked there, he came back and he played an instrumental role, he and Jacob, down on the flank there, because I don't think Chris had a good position. He did a superb job, like a nearly flawless performance there. But if he hadn't had the 5th down there to really tie up more of that woods, things might have gone against him because Melchett had an extra brigade down there that Artful and Jacob offset. So it almost perfectly worked. But that was their initiative, actually, because Artful didn't have a lot of, he could have gone in many different directions, but he tucked right in there really well, and he coordinated with Christ. And all that happened without you having to oversee it, which was pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, and that's how any of this was workable and possible. I mean, there's always this, I don't know, this sort of Zen mindset that I think you have to have at, running one of these things. And I'm not good at this. Everyone can go look at my Thoughts and Prayers channel where you can see exactly how crazy I am.
I love that, by the way. And I would highly recommend anyone who's listening to go, when you do this, create your own version of Thoughts and Prayers. It's just basically, it's like a captain's log, which allows you to go off script and just really talk to the umpire, and the umpire's not going to break fog of war, obviously, but it's a way to communicate thoughts. I'm going to mimic that myself in terms of when I do play, because it's really helpful for the umpire to read that stream, because it's not, here's what I intend for the pieces to do on the board. It's like, here's what I'm thinking, because later on when you get back and have this conversation, I know a lot of what you're thinking at different periods because you shared it in that channel. So.
Yeah, you get sort of an unfiltered look at and I really did try to make it just my raw, like, in the moment thoughts of, oh my God, I cannot believe this is happening, or, oh my God, this went great, or, oh, this is feeling really fun. Like, just whatever I was feeling at the moment or thinking at the moment, I tried to just put it down in a rough, nebulous form. So then when I go back and I can seem all authoritative and say, yeah, I try to be really zen, and just, you have to let things flow and play out the way you can. And then meanwhile, I'm like, why will no one build a pontoon bridge?
What I loved was Max Hugh or Max W was your chief of staff.
And it was...
Or did I get it backward?
I thought I had Ryan? Was his name?
Sorry, Ryan was your chief of staff.
Yes.
Max was the other chief of staff. I got him reversed. But your chief of staff was in there like a consigliere in your Thoughts and Prayers channel. I thought that was very funny, right? At first I was like, oh, it was great because the two of you were there just letting off steam, which was super.
Yeah. You need that.
So if we go all the way back to the planning process, even back to the campaign level, how things transpired. What was surprising? What emerged that you couldn't have foreseen?
Well, I think the biggest blind spot that I had in this was I I thought that there would be more things happening further north. I was surprised by how long I went without contact, and the longer we went without any serious contact besides Drosh, the more I think paranoia started to creep in of where are they, what are they
Right.
doing. There was a lot of talk or suspicion that the enemy was maybe trying to do this hooking flank around our entire path of advance.
Right.
And I don't know how sort of credible that threat really was, but I had somehow confused myself into thinking James was the enemy CIC, and that felt very James-like. So
James likes a long
he likes
flanking march.
his he likes his like outmaneuvering and changing the tempo of.
Right.
I don't think James is a big flanker per se, but he
You know,
definitely.
if you go down to Texas and you go to James's house and say, "Hey, let's go get a sandwich down the street," he'll drive all the way around the ring road to get around just because he likes to go the flank march.
He'll definitely put his yeah. He'll come up from the wrong angle at the drive-through window
Right.
and be like, "No,
James is right there. No, that's the director out. Too many casualties. We're going to take a 30-minute drive around the ring road. Come in the other way. Oh, what terrific stuff. So let's step out of the campaign itself. I'll throw a few maps in here. This is a format that we're developing in terms of the feedback, because I think hearing the player's perspective is great, but also I'm conscious that these become like history books where you just hear all these kind of uncoordinated facts and everything. So talk about overall the mechanics of the game and just some thoughts. As an umpire, we all value your insight. What are some things you think would be interesting to develop or to emphasize in the future?
Well, I mentioned, and I think this would be a lot of fun, is doing something where we had sort of a Prussian general staff
Yeah.
of players who come in and come up with war plan blue or whatever,
Yep.
where this is going to be our invasion of X country, and then they develop the plan, and then it gets handed off. Thank you very much for your service. Enjoy spectating the rest of the game, and then you get to see an unrelated group of poor hapless volunteers execute your plan.
Right.
I think that could be a lot of fun. I loved this intersection of the operational and the strategic and the tactical, sort of all rolled
Mm-hmm.
into one that we had here. But I felt, if anything, like sometimes it was my plan, it was my like system, and at the end of the day, I did get into at first I left Drosh alone, but once things get to a certain point, you can't leave your baby behind. I had to be there
Right.
at the last minute, to see it all through. I think it would be a lot of fun to design a plan kind of knowing that you're never going to get to actually execute it, knowing that there's going to be somebody else is going to have to then read what you wrote as sort of a briefing and a guide to what they're going to do.
Which is why it was really interesting and valuable that you said that you enjoyed the Drosh tactical fight, because you had actually conceived of the circumstances, handed it off to Decimos. He actually himself did not command that. He handed that down to Desar, which I thought was brilliantly done in that same, somebody else planned it, handed it off, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of room for that. I'm gonna definitely work on that. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think it gives a more it gives the best sort of impression of what an army commander should be doing. Um, it helps me resist the temptation of I should be at the front, I should be watching
Right.
everything happen, which is really almost purely for my enjoyment more than it is. I mean, I'm taking a position at the front line so I can see what's happening, not because I'm going to have more control over what's happening from being there necessarily. I mean, I do a little bit, but I'm still, you know, going through the chain of command loop, and I'm not, I'm basically observing.
Yeah.
The actual decisions are being made by the divisional commander, and having the army commander there is a bit just like having your boss show up and just be like, no, I'm just watching you work.
Yeah.
I don't know that
Which
that's...
actually, if you look at the big battles in the Austro-Prussian, Franco-Prussian War, that was the way it was. They just basically moved the corps into, or armies into position and said go, and then there was not much else they could do. So I think that's a great way to do it. I like that. So we're gonna play around with that. Good. What other thoughts do you have? This is the first of our interviews on of the participants. I want to interview as many as possible because it less that we're creating some body of work that other people are going to listen to. More we embed in our own consciousness what happened. And yeah, did you like the Swense is cheered by his troops image? I thought that was a...
I enjoy the images. I especially enjoy when they're like subtly wrong in a dreamlike sort of way, and it makes me all feel a bit like I'm Alice in Wonderland with like my cavalrymen looking back over their own faces.
Their own horses, and I think the hats are fantastic, and I think they're actually better than they were historically. The hat wear is just amazing.
They all look so like martial and proper and put together
Right?
times.
Somehow the AI thinks in that period that all the military has to look like chef's hats. I don't know why.
I just love how like tidy everything always seems to, like they all look like they're on parade at all times, no matter how much smoke and explosions are happening like around.
Yeah, right. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's fun though. The pictures really do. I mean, I'm being a little funny here, but the pictures really did add a sense of something to the battle, whether just a feeling more than anything, kind of impressionistic in that sense. Like you kind of got the feeling of what was happening more than like I don't need a picture showing like, oh yes, those are my men exactly as they would look going up the hill. It's just nice to know that there's like this sort of... it's another thing in the resolution to look at and be like, okay, that's helping ground me in terms of what's going on. So I thought that was a good touch.
There were elements of them that were absolutely perfect.
No, yeah.
And you didn't see the it's buried in many of the many strings. It's buried in one of the strings. One of the division commanders ordered his troops up into the mountains, and so I just put in a prompt, and an oil painting came back of soldiers climbing up, like clambering up this mountain, and there's one of the guys is reaching down to help another up, which just captures like this is really hard to get up this mountain. And then the commander immediately came back and said, "Oh, I didn't know it was that steep," which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, that's
because
really...
that was the sensory experience of seeing the picture and the map. He just said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know it was that steep," and then he reversed course and went around, which I thought worked really well. For some reason, that particular image software cannot do cannons. It just can't. There's no matter. I actually offline tried to get it to make cannons. It's probably something in the let's all make the world nice and Disneyland style, but it won't do cannons. It won't do artillery. So I had to use another one for that. But anyway, so we're still working on that. Good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time and talking through your experience as the CIC. We're going to try to get as many commanders as we can so we can really do a deep dive on the people's experience of this. This is audio only, so folks feel more comfortable coming on, but you're a terrific player and, of course, a great umpire in the larger sense. But really appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Thank you, and yeah, I had a great time and can't wait for the next one of these.
Awesome, thanks.